Hello, this is a Never Heard of It podcast. I'm Sean Harwell.
And this is Craig Moorhead, and we are here to talk about the movies that have slipped by you.
That's absolutely right, and we have a bit of a special, a milestone episode.
Mm-hmm.
This is our first listener-suggested episode, and I'd like to thank Melissa Spinelli for suggesting today's movie, which is The Song. And The Song is a 2014 romantic drama about a singer-songwriter whose marriage suffers when the song he wrote for his wife propels him to stardom. The film was inspired by the Song of Songs. That comes from Wikipedia, and as maybe you can tell, this is a faith-based film, and Melissa suggested this after listening to our episode about Holy Smoke, our very first episode.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was probably pretty apparent in that episode just how ignorant we are of the genre. Although we did spend a little bit of time criticizing it, which I think we should at some point acknowledge that, that maybe is the sort of standard for film snobs,
yes,
is to put down this genre. So I think it's great that, she gave us one to watch, and here we are. We watched it, we've done our due diligence, and now we're going to talk about it.
Absolutely.
If you have not yet suggested a movie, go to our Facebook page, go to @NeverPodcast on Twitter, or check us out at neverheardpodcast.com. It's easier to type than it is to say. And please, leave us suggestions. I know somebody suggested a movie that had something to do with Satan, so maybe we should do that to just balance this out, Craig. I don't know.
I think there are a lot more Satan-based movies than faith-based movies, but if anyone has the data on that, I'd love to see it.
Yes, especially in the horror genre.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's talk a little bit more about The Song. As I said, this is a 2014 film. It was written and directed by Richard Ramsey. I believe this is his debut feature. It stars Alan Powell, who is the lead singer of a Christian rock group called Anthem Lights. And it also stars Allie Faulkner and Caitlin Nicol-Thomas. Side note, there's another member of the cast named Danny Vinson who plays Allie Faulkner, her character's father, plays the character Shep Jordan. I recognized, he did a very small role in an episode of Eastbound and Down on the first season.
Oh, wow.
And then I was looking at his credits, and I'm embarrassed to say he's also credited as being in The Campaign, and I have no recollection whatsoever about what part. So, sorry, Danny, if you're listening, but thank you for being in two different things that I have my name on.
I was going to say, we would probably get to this later, and we'll definitely be talking about one of the bigger scenes that he's in, but I didn't know that myself, and yet that makes a lot of sense, because he seems, I don't want to say in a different class, because there was actually really good work going on here most of the time.
For sure.
But I mean, he definitely seemed like somebody who could fit in a whole lot of different situations, so...
Yeah, he's an everyman for sure, and he's good.
He's definitely an every Southern man, too.
He is very Southern. So what did you kind of think you were going to get into with the song here, Craig? Any sort of preconceived notion other than the fact that it was faith-based?
I mean, nothing other than that. Okay. From Melissa's suggestion, just the way she was talking about it, I did assume that this must be pretty good. It sounded like she definitely acknowledged that there are plenty of very lousy faith-based movies, and so I figured, okay, well this will probably be one of the better ones, and I think that definitely held true. But I mean, I was definitely worried, and I definitely have a bias when I know I'm going to be stepping into something that is coming out of the Christian faith in one way or another.
And is that because you don't want to be preached to? Is that the assumption that you're getting into? Or is it more about the quality?
Thinking about this stuff, I realized I've never really watched, I can't even really name other ones that I've watched. There was the one that came out last year, I think it was called God's Not Dead.
Right.
And the trailer made it look like basically all it was one of those chick tracts where the professor was saying, God doesn't exist. And then a student's like, no, he does exist. The Bible says, and it's just like, oh man, I don't want to watch that. Yeah. And so I feel like a lot of my reactions were based on things like that. Yeah, it doesn't look like a real human examination of anything. It just looks like everything is built out of the scripture, and it doesn't seem like it's going to, I don't know, give me anything new that I didn't get in Sunday school.
Right, and then it's also, I think, just by the sheer fact that we had not heard of this one, a lot of these movies just don't fall on your radar unless you are sort of tapped into that world, even like very specifically. I had seen trailers and stuff for God Is Not Dead. I think that one definitely reached a sort of critical mass where it seeped into all corners of anybody sort of paying a little bit of attention on the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah, this one was a complete mystery to me.
Yeah, me too. And that's really the thing, is it looks like it doesn't necessarily look or feel like a faith-based film outside of the fact that there's no one that you necessarily know just watching it.
Right. Yeah, and we should say, Kirk Cameron is not in this one. So
yeah,
if you were wondering.
Oh man, yeah. I think that's another one too. Is that last Christmas movie of his?
Yeah.
And I didn't see it, never watched it, but
I did see the
trailer itself. It was just like that's not good. There's no way it's good. And so I feel like that is what's built up the bias for me. It seems like it started out with stuff that was very sort of bald-faced. This is a Christian movie. This is a Christian message, and all that stuff.
Right.
And it seems like that delivery is getting a little more elegant over time. It's making a lot more money. It's attracting a lot more people to the genre, and it's kind of and I think that Noah is maybe an outgrowth of that. And I realize that some of the write-ups on Noah was saying that he didn't tell the story correctly or something like that, but it certainly seems like that came out of this swell of people showing that they want to watch these movies.
It's kind of interesting. I wanted to get into this, and maybe this is the best way to do it. I think you're going to have to go rent this movie. It's not streaming right now. We're recording this November 1st. Did not appear to be on Netflix or anywhere at the moment. So I went, and I think you got this off of Netflix's DVD subscription, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I actually went to my grocery store chain here in town, has a small video rental section still, which is, I guess, an increasing rarity, but it's fantastic. Like, finding this on DVD on the box, right? Immediately, like, the first thing I notice is there's a blurb, Craig, and here's what it says. It says, "Incredible, love the music, and the love story is great." Now, in your head, I'm sure you're thinking, well, this blurb is associated to a critic, somebody in the press. If not that, maybe somebody in the Christian community.
Sure.
Craig, you're wrong. This is Willie and Corey Robertson from Duck Dynasty.
Well, yeah.
And that's, immediately, yeah. I could care less about Duck Dynasty or any of those people, but it felt like a very, like just such a cynical marketing move to just, because I looked and this movie got like a very positive review on Variety.
Yeah.
Like there's legitimate sources that they could, just put like something, I don't know. So, and my other sort of takeaway from the video store experience was, oh my God, everything is in alphabetical order. Craig, like, I can't tell you how good that is. Like, I don't understand. Like, I was thinking about, like, all they have are new releases, right? So, yeah, it's a smaller catalog that they're dealing with. But can you imagine walking into a store to rent a movie and it wasn't alphabetized?
Oh, yeah.
How would you wouldn't find anything. And yet, every single streaming app that I know of just throws it up there, stick it.
Here are 1,000
it's
movies.
preposterous. Yeah. I do not understand. I'm sure somebody has a story behind this. It has something to do with algorithms and marketing research. It's crap. I hate it. So go to your video store and enjoy the experience of seeing things in order.
It's true. Yeah, at least that maybe there should just be a filter. It's like, do you want to look at this like you're in a store?
Yes.
Yes, I would. So, Sean, what were your first impressions of the movie?
My first impression was a bad one. And that was mainly because the movie opens with a prologue that's set, it covers, I don't know, maybe 20 years or so but starts in, I think, the late 70s with a singer named David King. He's a country star. He's on TV. You know, he's doing the Nashville thing. He's very much, I guess, cut in the mold of a Merle Haggard, I suppose, was only sort of like visually what I associated it. Unfortunately, the actor Aaron Benward, who is also a musician, is wearing a terrible wig.
I had that same note, actually, yeah.
It's god awful, and I don't understand why they stuck with it for a solid. That prologue's probably pushing 7 minutes, I'd say 7-8 minutes, as it walks us through this guy's life and ultimate death, and he leaves behind a son who is named Jed King, who is going to follow in his father's footsteps a little bit into the country music world, and he's the main character of the movie. But I liked how it kind of moved. You know, there's some transitions there where, you know, you see the father, David King. You know, he has an affair with a married woman. I think, correct? Yeah. She's married to someone in the band. It's a very like the camera's moving and it cuts to the woman puking, and that's your clue that she's pregnant. There's no like pregnancy test or, oh my God, I can't believe you're pregnant. Right. Or, I mean, I kept thinking, it was like, okay, I can think of like 6 or 7 worse choices for that transition. They handled it really pretty well. And then there's all this voiceover, which is I think they're reading from the actual Song of Solomon, the scripture. And man, it feels so much like Terrence Malick's Tree of Life to me. I mean, and to the point where I'm like, there's no way these guys watch this, or the person, you know, Richard Ramsey is not aware of that movie, I think. But to its credit, in my opinion, I love Tree of Life, and I thought it worked really kind of poetically, and it's not, some of it is a little... nail on the head with what you're seeing on screen, which is always my beef against voiceover. I don't need to hear and see the exact same thing. Sure. And then, you know, you get this really hard cut to the title and the song, you know, that pops up, and then we're like 15 years later, I think in 2006 in Louisville. And so I guess my sort of overall opinion on this movie was I felt a little unsteady until about half an hour into the movie. I wasn't quite sure what this was going to be about, what the conflict is. And I still have some questions about that and whether, you know, the effectiveness of it. I think I was kind of put at ease. I felt like, okay, I'm not going to hate this movie, I don't think, unless it really turns on, what am I trying to say here? Unless it starts preaching to me, basically. I'm just trying, I'm trying to avoid saying that, but that's it, you know, and I didn't feel like that was going to happen. Yeah. It felt like these people understood the music world a little bit, and I didn't know who these people were at all. I had not yet looked up to see that they were musicians, but I could, you know, you can tell like, okay, those people are actually know how to play an instrument, and that's always like a relief to me. So I think that was sort of that was my initial reaction. What about you?
Again, it was very much the same with the wig. There's a pretty bad beard later on. I think the facial hair around the head was a bit of a struggle, but otherwise, I feel the same way. That whole open was told, really well visually. It felt confident, and that is exactly also that's what I needed to see. I believe this was Ramsey's first feature. He'd done a ton of shorts.
Yeah, I think so.
But I mean, it definitely felt like he knew how he wanted it to move, and it moved really well. And that opening is also really dark, and I got a bit lost because not knowing anything, I thought we were just starting with the guy who was going to become famous.
Same here.
Yeah, and so I was like, wow, we're really jumping into this. And so he has the affair, but you kind of skipped over this because this was kind of an incredible shot I didn't expect from. I guess I expect a faith-based movie to have a pretty soft touch. Even when you're going to go to tragedy or something that's horrible, it's going to be pretty suggested and maybe off camera. But they had the affair, and then cut to woman on the phone talking to him, crying in the background. Her husband's body swinging in the breeze because he hung himself. Yeah, just like wow. So we're jumping into it. Yeah, his wife leaves. He sticks with the woman, which I also thought was pretty interesting. This by this point I had figured out this was not our main character, and so it was kind of that thing of, okay, he completely wrecked his first marriage. He loved her. He's torn up about it, but then he kind of starts to rebuild with this other woman. Mm-hmm. You know, I kind of expected him to just set himself on fire after having the affair. Just, you know what I mean? And so the fact that that everything didn't end and he just became like a miserable hobo somewhere made me feel like, okay, so this is, it feels like we're in the human realm. We're not just, if you do something bad, you are now punished.
Right. And you're setting up the very important fact that Jed is the product of infidelity.
Yeah.
And yet, you know, I mean, I guess you could make the argument that clearly something good came from what was a very bad situation.
Right.
And again, this is all sort of like covered like that sequence that everybody loves in the movie Up. Like it's all like, there's no dialogue. I mean, I don't remember other than the voiceover. It's covering a lot of ground there. I will say I'm gonna pick one bone here.
Go for it.
The trope of having a person cough blood.
Yeah.
We got to get rid of that in movies. I don't know. We got to get rid of it. We got to find more interesting ways to do it. I've seen this too many times.
Yeah. No, you're totally right. And I just saw that in something else recently, and it does kind of drive me crazy. It's like if a scene is going on and someone coughs and it's sort of focused on them when they cough, but no one makes a big deal of it. It's like that person's going to die.
Right. Well, you know what sucks though is like we're criticizing that, and I realized this as soon as I wrote it down. I'm like, that's actually like a really, you know, significantly subtle and visual way just like, yeah. But at this point, like, it's just been done too many times. Like, you almost have to go back to the non-subtle version of getting that exposition out there to make it interesting again.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I guess I'm glad they didn't go into something more prolonged to get to that point. It's like, okay, you got blood on your hand. You're going to die.
Well, let's keep walking a little bit.
Let's do it.
Yeah? And so, yes, we are moved to the present, near present, 2006. Jed King is basically a small-time act playing in small clubs, coffee houses, whose main interest as a musician is surely the fact that he is the son of a legend, to the point where the manager, Stan, who is played by the actor Gary Jenkins, tells Jed basically, you're not going to be anything until you write a song that means something. You know, your music just doesn't have that personal connection to take you to the next level. Mm-hmm. Tells him something about playing a fall festival at a vineyard.
Fall festival. Can't be Halloween. Okay, go ahead.
He ends up going there to this small town Kentucky. You know, they got face painting, they got wine tasting, and then they're having a little musical performance at the end of it. It's all set outside. There's lots of bales of hay and pumpkins and things like that. And this is where he meets Rose, who is the daughter of the winery owner. And I didn't even think about it, but I really liked that choice later on because it comes out in conversation pretty quickly. Rose and Jed hit it off right off the bat. Mm-hmm. But again, I thought it was handled pretty well. And she said something about an older boyfriend who dumped her because, let me find this little line here. She basically says, like, he wanted her to sleep with him. She would not do it. Assumption being she's holding out for marriage. And she says something about, I know I deserve better than that, but I'm just not sure better exists anymore. And I thought that's a pretty interesting viewpoint from a woman. I mean, I feel like that's a modern struggle for sure. In the age of sending, text messages with pictures of your penis as a way of introduction to single women, which is terrible.
Oh, yeah,
it works
terrible.
Correct. It's terrible, yes. But I also like, okay, so this girl obviously has a very, important moral code to her in this one particular realm. They're working at a vineyard. They're not teetotalers, right? And so to me, I was like, okay, again, at least you're giving us something to say that these people aren't necessarily positioning themselves to being completely morally better than those of us watching it.
Right. Right.
And again, I just like that choice. I thought it was a nice choice. The vineyard plays very little into the whole movie, but it's there in the background. It looks nice. And I don't know. I kind of like that.
I did too. And this whole segment, let's see, we introduce the bad guy boyfriend that's kind of a bad guy for like a scene.
Yeah.
He's
Eddie.
Ridiculously bad, like clearly one of the worst people you could ever possibly know.
Yeah.
Just saying horrible things that everyone just clearly it was a setup, and it had a decent payoff later on. My favorite part of the scene, though, that actually really worked for me was when he's talking about the Beatles, and I can't remember how it was brought up.
He says Rose claims to know nothing about music. She doesn't recognize Jed King as being the son of David King because she doesn't know who David King is.
Right.
And she's saying, no, seriously, I know nothing about music. He's like, you got to know something. Name your favorite Beatles song. Everybody has a favorite Beatles song. And then what?
And so she says, "Turn, turn, turn," which is it's by the Byrds, right?
Correct. Yeah.
So this is what I liked. Maybe it was just her delivery on this. I don't know it. But so she says, "Turn, turn, turn." He laughs. He's like, "Oh, that's not a Beatles song." She says, "Yeah, it's a Beatles." He says, "No, that's by the Byrds." She says, "Well, I guess we can just agree to disagree."
Yeah.
And that it just really made me laugh. Like
it was
the delivery of that was perfect in that it felt really goofy without making her stupid. It was like actually good dialogue. And so that was another thing that made me feel good as we kept watching this movie.
So yeah, they fall in love, and basically, I don't remember the exact situation, but he says something about wanting to ask her dad, ask her dad's approval to even ask her out on a date. And I thought, okay,
this is a big point for me too.
That's completely unrealistic. But then the girl, Rose, says, well, you don't have to, like, maybe you're going to ask my dad's hand, for my hand in marriage, maybe, but you don't have to ask him just to ask me out or whatever. And still, it's like, well, he's going to do it because that's just how good of a guy he is. Which, we'll get into where that character goes in a little bit because it doesn't completely stay that. But it's definitely setting up a big female fantasy here, I think. Like, I mean, he strolls in being the perfect guy. They end up getting married in a chapel that he's building himself by hand. Yeah. He doesn't finish it before they finally like, okay, we got to get married.
I remember seeing a bit of this whenever I was a kid, like shortly before I was going to college. I remember there being talk. I remember there being sort of pamphlets about how you're supposed to date people.
You had a pamphlet?
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I didn't get one of those.
No.
That would explain high school.
Well, yeah, I never read it, and that's why I didn't have any girlfriend. No, but there was a big thing about how the proper way is you're supposed to go talk to the father. And basically the father loans his daughter out as if she's property. This never set right for me. And I really, like, watching that scene, I was like, we had just come off that great turn bit of dialogue. And I'm like, oh, I like her. And I really wanted her to just, like, completely smack that idea down. Just like, you don't have to ask my dad anything. I'll make my own decisions.
That would have been nice.
And it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Then he goes and has a conversation. She listens by the door. And Sean, that whole part pissed me off so bad. It really, that one stuck for me for a really long time.
That was, I would have been fine if they had cut that out entirely. Yeah. And I don't think that you would have lost really anything with their relationship. No. I mean, the simple fact that he brings that up to her, that's enough.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And then, like you're saying, like, no, she's an adult. Like, she's a smart enough woman to say, you don't need to do that. Like, let's just take things slow and
right. And I definitely get the sort of the romance factor, like as a traditional thing. I mean, not for dating though. No matter what, I feel like that's really weird for dating.
Yeah.
Like if a kid ever comes to me and asks if they can date Grace, I'm gonna be like, dude, I'm gonna say no. The answer is no. If you ask me if you can date my daughter, the answer is an automatic no.
That's a good question. We'll pose this to our Facebook listeners. If you're a woman and listening to this, would you feel comfortable with a man wanting to ask your father to date you? And I think Rose in this movie is probably she looks to be late 20s, very early 30s. Yeah. I mean, we're not talking about like fresh out of college girl here, right? So she's very much an adult.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get to the bottom of this. That'd be a good poll question, I think, to have. after their wedding night, you do get some romantic, little hints there of nothing gratuitous, but it's enough that it feels like real and like it's not like these people don't have chemistry at all.
Yes.
It's not that. The next morning, he's sort of sitting down writing a song, and then she comes out and he plays the song to her, and then we do another leap in time to 5 years later, and Jed is now been propelled to a bit of stardom. Here's something that I read I want to ask you about. Mm-hmm. I watched this whole movie and never once really thought about him being specifically in the genre of Christian rock or even worship music, I guess.
Yeah.
Because it, to me, was played as Americana.
Yeah.
And the sort of roots music, which we can talk about. I do want to talk about. But then I read something today. It was like, yes, then he was propelled to Christian music stardom.
I didn't get that at all. I felt like he was a country star because he's like cover of magazines and stuff.
Yeah.
Which I was assuming was kind of a Rolling Stone, stand-in. So I was like, yeah, he's not a Christian music star.
No. And I mean, to the point where, like, I even wrote down, I was like, man, like, you can really tell that, like, hipster culture, at least of fashion, has kind of invaded every aspect of, like, pop life at this point, because, like, this guy's backing band, I mean, they look like, they could be Mumford & Sons or, like, Imagine Dragons or,
yeah.
And this dude, Alan Powell, goes full beard for like the next, and it just gets thicker and thicker for like the next 40 minutes, and he ends up looking like one of the Avett brothers or something.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's crazy.
Yeah. They all paved the way for this character,
right? For
sure. I had read that there was that was not a real beard. Sometimes it looked good, sometimes it didn't. But what I had read was they went with the fake beard just because they could shoot things out of order and all that stuff. They didn't have to like have a beard and then shave it.
Makes total sense, and it's not as bad as that wig,
right? Yeah. So he can sing. He's got a decent voice. Like you believe him for that. It was still a little tough. Like the song wasn't bad, but the standard I think I always hold it to is the song from That Thing You Do, which you hear 1,000 times in that movie, and it means something different every time you hear it, and they're in a different place, and it's just a fantastic song. So it wasn't like you believe in that movie that they would hit the charts with that song. It just feels like that feels right. With this one, it wasn't bad, but like I can't remember the tune of it at all.
Yeah, it's just not as strong of a song to be played as much as it is played in this movie, because I definitely got to that point where, later on there's a character named Shelby who's a violinist, and she joins him on stage to perform this song on tour. I mean, like half a dozen times probably in this movie. And so a couple times you just get sort of the intro, and it's that violin intro from her. And I'm just like, by the end of it, I'm like, man, if I hear that intro one more time, like I'm done with this song. Yeah. But I will say, the music on the whole is not bad. There's stuff on the soundtrack I noticed from like Ricky Skaggs and Emmylou Harris. And I know this guy, Vince Emmett, who did, I think, he was like the music producer, basically, the T-Bone Burnett of this film. Yeah. He's got some real kind of traction in that world, in that bluegrass world, and sort of the Americana stuff that's going on. I will say, there's a whole sort of bit where, as his star is growing, Jed goes out on tour and ends up, the opening act is this woman named Shelby Bell in her band. And as soon as she comes on screen, to me, that was a weak point, because and I don't think the performance is bad. I think the character is pretty interesting. But man, she comes on and it's like, okay, here's the dark-haired girl. She's got tattoos.
Yeah.
She's smoking. You just know, like, it felt cliche.
She's the temptation that's going to lead him down. Yeah, and that was the thing. I wrote down as soon as she came on, she will lead him, she will basically lead him into darkness. It will be her fault. And I was glad to find that in the end, it didn't really feel that way. I mean, he was making his own choices, and he made bad choices. So yeah. And even I think she ultimately becomes more than just that. Right.
In moments, there's some really good moments. I do think when the film becomes arguments between those characters and between Jed and Rose, they're not the strongest parts of the movie.
Sure.
And it's just those are hard scenes. It's hard to have a marital argument on screen that feels like anything other than melodrama. It's just hard to do.
Yeah.
And I feel like these guys are giving it their all.
Yeah.
But it still, it just comes across that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think the thing is with a movie like this that is completely focused on marriage and sort of marriage morality and it's coming from the Bible, essentially, it's hard to have, I mean, fights in a marriage are about nothing. Generally, I mean, you don't have big, profound arguments. You might have profound discussions with each other, but if you're arguing, it's about nothing. It's about the laundry. So yeah, it's kind of hard to really keep this going with the big sort of grand points it has to make.
You should really do the laundry tomorrow, Craig.
Shut up.
It'd be nice of you.
Shut up. Just shut up.
Okay.
Sick of hearing it.
You sort of get a little bit into the music biopic, just sort of familiar structure territory during the last hour of this movie where the guy's on the road and he's out for 3 months at a time. And even aside from the temptation of Shelby, before that really kind of gets acted upon, it's just a simple argument between a man and a wife about, I wish you were around more. Sure. I want to be in your life more. It is so hard to do that in a way that does not make the wife, or if the situation is reversed gender-wise, although I rarely see that in movies, to not make that person look like a nag.
Yeah.
And she definitely has those moments. The big one for me was, I think it is before he cheats. Mm-hmm. But Jed is saying, look, we got to go to Europe. I'm going to be gone 3 months. Come with me.
Yeah.
Come with me. Bring our son. Rose's main reason for staying behind is that her father is sick.
Right.
Perfectly legitimate. Yeah. But what happens in the dialogue is she also gets into the fact that, I kind of wrote it down. She was saying, what kind of life is that? Being dragged around, from one jet to hotel to the next. And I'm thinking, for 3 months? That's a pretty fun life. Yeah. Go see Europe. Take your kid, who's old enough to probably enjoy it. Ask your dad what he would want you to do, whether he would want you to stay there and worry about him.
Right.
Because you haven't really seen how sick he is. You've only kind of been told.
Sure.
And so that to me, again, it's I get what you're going for. It comes across as a nag. Yeah. And it's hard to sort of sympathize with the person that's saying this in those moments. The question of what is the conflict of this movie, and I asked myself that a couple of times. But some of that is he's this is what he feels like he was born to do, is to sing these songs and go out and do it. And he's found success and he's kind of capitalizing on it. Mm-hmm. And I do think those struggles that they would have as a couple are real.
Yeah.
But it would be nice to see her enjoy some of that life too, and it's I couldn't help but feel kind of sympathetic and bad for Jed in that moment, and I do think the film, to be fair, is trying to say that yes, Rose has some flaws and she's not completely guilt-free in this problem of the relationship.
Because that's just marriage. Yeah. So somebody wants marriage. Something, the other person wants this other thing. There's a conflict there. I think about it. I was thinking about that too in terms of, we're both people who work in the arts. We both are going after things. We're pursuing things, and if things start really happening that are great, it really kills you if that starts to harm your relationship. Mm-hmm. So that much I could definitely feel. Yeah, because obviously he's excited because this is really working out for him. But then the woman he loves, doesn't want him to go. She'd rather he quit everything than.
Yeah, and I do think that's maybe my biggest complaint about the movie is that Jed can either have success in the music business or a successful marriage. Right. And I just don't feel like that is a realistic line to be drawn in the sand, because I feel like within 5 minutes of doing some internet research, I could find 100 examples of musicians who have healthy marriages, who have been doing this for years, who've got kids. That's not to say it's not easy. What about all those soldiers and their wives, and they go overseas?
Sure.
There is a way to have both, I think. And I think it would have been nice if the movie had kind of landed on that somehow. Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, despite the infidelity, Jed turns his life around, goes to rehab. Rose does leave him. Yep. She takes off the wedding rings.
Yeah.
Done with him.
Yes.
But Jed comes back. He comes back to her.
Right.
So they end up, there is a happily ever after. And I think that's in some ways an adult move to say that, look, these things happen. And there's a way to not have that be the complete destruction of your marriage. Sure. And yet, I felt like there was a bit of injustice done to the Rose character to say that, well, if he comes back and says just the right words, then okay, yeah, she'll forgive him. Right. It's going to take a while. Right. And you know what? His dad was a cheater too.
Right.
So maybe it's just in his blood. It's in his DNA. It's just something guys got to do. They got to get it out of their system. It's like, no,
Yeah, I think this kind of comes out of the same place that I'm going to ask your dad if I can date you comes from a little bit.
And probably specifically to the scripture in this case.
Right. Well, absolutely.
I mean, that's what's being talked about in the voiceover throughout the whole thing.
Right. And yeah, exactly. It's marriage from the point of view of a man. And men just struggle so hard with these marriages. Women, I wish they could just know how much we struggle. Maybe finally this
tempting
movie
us,
will
ladies.
Yeah. Explain to everybody how hard we have it.
Yes.
It's very one-sided in that way, and that's unfortunate. It would have been nice to see, because they also did some pretty good. There's one time when he comes home, I think just before he tells her about they have to go to Europe. There's a really nice bit of family relationship building where like his kid comes down and says, Daddy, we're in a band. I want to play drums, and he ends up like in the room with his kid, and the kid's playing drums and they're playing guitar, and it feels like a good movie moment. It feels right. It feels yeah, that's what you'd want to do if you hadn't been around your family for a long time. So yeah, but yeah, I mean, there's definitely kind of that patriarchal thing happening over. It's a lot about the struggle of men. Just
even thinking about country music in that world, why wouldn't you do this movie about a female star?
Yeah.
Because I can guarantee that, like, the people that can't name a single Taylor Swift song can tell you that, oh yeah, she's the one that writes about her bad relationships with boyfriends.
Yeah.
So it's
absolutely.
Like there would have been something about that would have been slightly fresher and a little more interesting to see, like, the temptation from that side. Yeah. There's a whole different set of rules.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you could have gotten into, if she's a singer and she cheated on her husband, then tabloid. Not that it ever got into tabloids in this, but if there was like a tabloid thing in the movie, she would just be a slut.
Oh yeah.
And the guy, well, that's how it goes. He's such a dog, So it's like, yeah, it would have. You're right. It would have been.
Well, I mean, and to the point that the Shelby character is portrayed and called a whore by Rose.
Absolutely.
Like, she throws herself at Jed from start to finish.
Well, so yeah, I think we can kind of jump through the middle, and we kind of have. I mean, we've basically told you. So he becomes famous. He has a strained relationship with his wife. Mm-hmm. He ends up deciding to go ahead and sleep with Shelby
because he got drunk.
He did get drunk.
Something he normally does.
Yeah. But she didn't trick him into it. No. She didn't do any of that stuff. She's very interested in the man. It's not good. She knows he's married. It's not good of her either. But I at least I was glad it wasn't just her, like, if you don't sleep with me, I'll tell everyone you raped me. Like, it's not that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's at least there are two people making a choice.
And I did like, she does say, she has this discussion with him where she talks about like liking his music and then saying something to the effect of like, all I could think of was, what kind of music could this guy write if he just let go of all those rules?
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that's a really interesting, it's an internal conflict for an artist, I think, I don't know. I remember somebody, I think a friend of ours a couple years ago was like talking about like the Jonas Brothers, like, oh man, if those guys got into drugs, like imagine, like they could be like the next Beach Boys or something. I was like, well, that's a weird thing to like wish. I mean,
Yeah.
But because I kept asking myself, like, Jed is our main character. Like, what is his conflict? Because the relationship isn't really tested until, like I say, like you're probably in the second half of the movie, and like you get this refrain from the Song of Solomon about chasing after the wind over and over and over. And I think that is meant to be taken as he's chasing success or chasing the ability to maintain a level of success. Did you have similar feelings as far as like, what is the real sort of dramatic conflict of this movie?
Yes, I did. I definitely think you're right in that case. I mean, it's not the type of movie where, everything's normal and then the bad thing happens and everything goes topsy-turvy.
Right.
It didn't really crank that up to 11 at all. He was never in that bad a spot until he slept with Shelby. Mm-hmm. And that's when everything, and I mean that's in the last half an hour.
Oh, for sure.
Because then it's sleep with Shelby. Wife finds out, that all goes bad. He runs off with Shelby. They immediately become drug addicts.
Yep, popping pills, puking, and he's like, I'm gonna end it. Tries to kill himself, and then he's in the hospital. It's a pretty quick spiral down, and then I thought that was pretty brutal, actually. And I get it, because I wouldn't really take to being cheated on either. But you go to his bedside after he has slit his wrists, become a drug addict, and then slit his wrists. And you're like, here are my rings. Screw you, pal. Just like, man, all right, nothing to live for. But yeah, I mean, yes, there's not a lot to hold on to conflict-wise, besides the fact there's tension at home. I mean, it could have been interesting to do a little more with, if you're chasing after the win or chasing success, maybe he's trying to live up to the success of his old man.
Sure.
I feel like we've seen that before. In a way, I'm kind of glad that they didn't.
Yeah.
But in a way, it almost feels like, well, then what's the point of having the beginning with his father, other than just to imply that, well, like father, like son, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. He's a cheater and this guy's a cheater too.
What does he want? I mean,
I don't quite know what that really did for the narrative here.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of with you. I didn't quite know what this guy wants. I mean, ultimately he makes a decision that he wants his marriage more than anything else, and yet he has that for the bulk of the movie.
It might have been interesting if some of that backstory at the beginning had maybe really shown his struggle as a songwriter or something.
Yeah,
instead of jumping in. I mean, it is interesting. Like the first time you see him, and I think this is what you were saying before. And maybe I misheard you, but the first time
I don't even know. You tell me, as always. Just tell me what I was saying. I would appreciate it.
Well, the first time you see him in the movie as an adult, he is singing a song. People are singing with him, but it's his dad's song, right?
Okay, I apologize. I got that wrong.
Well, so the first time you see him, he's singing a song, and the song he's singing is his dad's, and everyone's singing along with him. And what I wanted to feel from that, I feel like I projected it a bit on that scene. Like what I wanted to feel from that was he wants that love that he saw his dad get from people, but the only way he gets it is by singing his dad's songs. He can't do it with his own songs. And there's a little bit of that in the movie, and it is interesting that until he meets her, he doesn't write a song that people really grab onto. And that's generally good, but it would have been neat if there was some way to work in, he's poor and hungry living in Nashville trying to make it work. And
I think
struggle.
So, yeah.
That was not fun, so that once he gets somewhere, he didn't just want to give it up all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, maybe even just like a hint of that sort of inside Llewyn Davis.
Yeah.
Struggle. I mean, yeah, that's a great point, especially in the era that we are living in, and knowing that is so hard to really make a life as a musician in the terms that it was defined in previous generations. And so I liked the little moments that were there of that, like him saying to his wife, which again, it sort of sounds like he's just making a justification for being gone, but look, people respond to what I'm doing. Like I get people saying that this music is this is helping them. Like this is saving them. This is teaching them about God. And that has real value. And, I think that's kind of interesting, because there's that component of, as an artist, you got to do it for yourself, obviously.
Sure.
you do it because you enjoy it and you get that kind of value of it. And then when it becomes a career, you've got to maintain that career, and then you've got like fan expectations and all that stuff that comes along with it, and the baggage of touring and like trying to scrape by.
Yeah.
I do think, like 10% more of like that side of things, like the industry side of things, would have been kind of cool.
Yeah.
And like exactly what you're saying that's pretty interesting. Like see him struggling in Nashville a little bit and not having. I had that thought too, just to the fact that it seems like they live in the house that Rose's father, I mean, they basically live.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. That's what I thought.
So
they live.
I don't know. So he's like,
essentially.
That's a pretty sweet deal for him. Like he's been making all this money, like touring around the world for like 9 months out of the year. It's like, and they're not even paying rent properly. Like,
yeah, that's pretty sweet.
I mean, yeah, some struggle would have been interesting beyond just the internal struggle.
But that actually reminds me of another small nitpicky point that that felt hackneyed when it happened. So
okay.
I think he's in rehab. He gets his son on the phone, or his son calls him, and they have a short conversation.
He calls the house.
Right.
Yeah.
They have a short conversation, and the son says, "Hey, are you coming to the fall festival? You know, it's like October 8th or something." And he's like, "Yes, I'll definitely be there." And then a scene later, his manager shows up and says, "Hey, I've got this great comeback show for you. It's what you need. It's the only thing in the world you could possibly need. When is it? October 8th." And I was like, God.
And he immediately says, "No, I can't do it. I got to go somewhere else." I mean, the manager says like two other things, and then you cut to, and he's going to the show in Nashville.
Yeah.
That felt very movie driven.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I'm saying? Like that was driven by.
Like, it felt like a note from somebody. Like, we need one thing to kind of just, and he's really got to give it up. And it's like,
I honestly, I just wanted, like, I kind of liked it. He's just told his manager, like, no, I'm not doing that. Like, this is not, I'm going home. I got something else I got to do. And if they had just cut to the fall festival, I'd been totally fine. I think, like, I mean, it needed something else, but
and maybe it did, or maybe all it needed was, Rose at the fall festival, just assuming he wasn't going to be there. Something because, sure. I mean, you've gotten to the point where, like, he's tried to kill himself. Now he's getting himself clean. His wife has given him his rings back. And then when it's like, hey, you want to go back and do that stuff that ruined your entire life? And he's like, yeah, I guess so. I don't know. There's a part of me
you make a good point. No. Yeah. Well, he pitched it as like, this is your moment of redemption.
Right.
You can go do this. You're right. I didn't think about it in those terms, but it does feel like a note. Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, it just feels like it's not the worst note, but So that was a little hackneyed, but it gave him a reason to give a confident speech as he stormed out and said he didn't need it anymore, which... Yeah. So then he ends up at the fall festival and tells her he gave everything up, and then he plays Turn by the Byrds. And I mean, that was pretty good.
It was a nice callback.
It was. Yeah. It was a nice callback. It was a song everybody knows. You don't have to necessarily think of it as a Christian song if you don't want to. It has bigger meaning for everyone. So, yeah, I mean, that was pretty effective. The last thing that I would say about it as we kind of leave the movie and we're going into the credits, because this was something that I really held on to until the very last shot, because I wanted to be proven wrong. And not that it's the worst thing in the world, but this movie was very white.
Oh, I mean, sure.
There was nothing to cause concern.
Not even a hint, was there?
Yeah. Oh, man, like I just wanted somebody. I mean, you're in the music world. I don't know.
They should have got Darius Rucker, dude. Right? Get Darius in there.
How do we not?
Hootie.
Oh, man. So, so that bugged me.
You're absolutely right.
That and you're in the music world, but everything, even to the point where when you decide you're going to have sex with the woman you're on tour with, it's like close the door and that's all we see until the next morning. It's like, man, the music world is NC-17, like... Not that I'm looking for hardcore stuff or anything, but it's like, I mean, the movie is a lot about infidelity and having sex and lust and love and.
Well, I read that this, I guess, was sold in certain circles as being the sexiest ever faith-based movie.
I don't doubt that.
I don't either.
PG-13. I mean, like it definitely goes beyond. I think what a lot would.
Let's do real quick. Any favorite scenes?
Well, again,
anything we haven't mentioned that kind of
turn dialogue was pretty strong.
I got one for you that I bet you liked. Yeah. Maybe. I'm curious. Do you remember shortly after Jed cheats on Shelby, comes back home, Danny Vincent's character, the father, Rose's father, had died. He starts having like visions and nightmares.
Oh, yeah.
About that first nightmare where he sees like Danny Vincent in the unfinished chapel,
he's
like
gutting
cleaning
a pig or something.
Deer.
Yeah, deer.
And it just like charges him. I was like, oh yeah. Whoa, that was pretty cool. Like
that definitely went.
Maybe this guy's got some horror movie future in him.
Yeah, that definitely went further than I thought. So the only other thing I was going to bring up was, this is still in the world of wigs and beards.
My favorite of worlds, by the way.
Yes. Jed King's mother never ages. She shows up in a couple of things, but she just has a white hair wig on. Like she looks not a day older than in the earlier stuff in the movie.
To the point where I thought that was his sister until you just told me that.
It is.
I didn't know who you were talking about at first. I thought you were talking about just in the prologue, but no, she's at the wedding and stuff, right? Complete white wig.
So it was like there were those little things.
Beautiful woman.
Oh, absolutely.
She's gorgeous. Yeah.
I mean,
but she's not his mom.
Yeah. No.
Okay, I thought that was a sister. I'm like, who is that woman?
Yeah,
she has really white hair for him to not have any. Like,
those are the little things. Like those are the little things you expect to be throughout the entire movie.
I feel bad because it does feel like we're picking on their hair and makeup department in this movie.
I know. I'm sorry,
but I gotta say, I mean, the role of that department is to not stand out. And,
I would not have noticed it. I think as much. Had the rest of the movie not been as solid as it was. So I'll just have to. And
actually, you know what? Sorry, Richard. I'm going to point the finger at you because as the director, you're the one that should have just said, "Take the wig off."
Yeah.
Clearly, we're wig focused today on this.
Big focus on wigs.
So, what's your kind of overall take on this? I'm still kind of. I wondered even just today thinking about it. Like, am I being? Because I felt like you and I talked about like, okay, we're not going to go just sit here and criticize this movie. Like, we need to watch it as a movie. Sure. And not even really focus on the message, even though it's selling itself as a message movie. I mean, essentially, that's what you're saying to your audience if you're positioning and promoting yourself as a faith-based film, is that there will be stuff in this movie of value, and that there's a whole teaser, a reel for Affirm Films on this DVD that they spell it out for you exactly like what their sort of mission statement is. And so I do wonder if our wanting to watch this without a critical filter of what it's saying, maybe it somehow ended up biasing our experience of it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's any way around it.
I don't either. And you know what? It's just, I think my takeaway is a solidly made movie for the very most part. Yeah. And I was never really bored, and I enjoyed the experience, enjoyed the performances. A little iffy about the overall message of the relationship as it kind of sort of pertains to particularly the wife.
Yes.
That's kind of it. Worth watching, I think, for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a subject that doesn't necessarily make it a faith-based film. It's not an argument about does God exist.
Nope.
It's something everyone can relate to. I actually really kind of like that whole. I really kind of like that whole passage about chasing the wind, and I've seen everything on earth and all that.
I do too.
Like, I mean, awesome thoughts, and just it's about like loving people and how hard that can be and all that. So, and very well made. So yeah, I can't complain.
I'm really interested to see another movie by this director, just knowing that he probably can't go back to the same well of using that voiceover technique. He could. Right. There's nothing to stop him from doing so. But I'm interested in seeing him do something a little different from that, whether it's within the same faith-based world or not. Tip our hat to the song.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Melissa.
Yes.
I saw the light, no more darkness, no more night. Now I'm so happy, no sorrow inside. Praise the Lord, I saw the light.
Yeah, before we move on, I just want to point your ears to another podcast, and that is Podcasting Them Softly. It's two gentlemen, Nick and Frank, and they talk about movies in a much smarter way than I think Craig and I do.
If you're looking for a thinking man's podcast, that's the one you're looking for.
Some really great stuff. I listened to the episode about Domino, the Tony Scott movie with like Keira Knightley, and Richard Kelly wrote this thing. And, I kind of want to see this movie now, and I definitely did not before listening to this podcast. If you remember those trailers at all, it just did not look like my cup of tea. And I'm kind of curious now. Like, I enjoyed listening to them talk about it. And then they just did an episode with the cinematographer extraordinaire, Tim Orr. So I'm very excited to listen to that. They had him on and interviewed him. And so it looks like they've got a bunch of cool guests. And Nick has been commenting a bunch on our Facebook stuff, so go find him and go follow him because we've talked about this. Like his Facebook posts are amazing. Like he just throws up all these cool stills.
Yeah,
I mean, like every night it seems like he's watching a movie that I've never heard of. So Nick, stop doing our job, I guess.
Yeah, slow down.
Go check that out.
Yeah. Also want to give a shout out to listener Gretchen Harwell, who Sean has had some romantic dalliances with, as I understand it. Not that I want to, air everybody's laundry. Well, she sent a link to a podcast talking about deprogramming, which is also from our kind of came out of our Holy Smoke podcast a while back. Mm-hmm. And I listened to that, and it kind of negated my whole idea of pitching a story about a deprogrammer who like kidnaps someone from ISIS and tries to deprogram her, or it seems to anyway. But deprogramming has an amazing history, and I'll make it very short here for you. It's pretty much a scam. When it originated, it was because people were really worried about cults, Satanist cults, and so on, and stuff like that.
Right.
And the guy who kind of got it rolling figured out that if he had parents hire him, he could pretty much kidnap anybody and do whatever he wanted. And I mean, it really runs the gamut of whatever he wanted. It's pretty horrible to even think about. But then apparently the Church of Scientology ended up suing him for something and suing him out of existence and then owning his company and now do their own deprogramming.
Perfect sense.
It's amazing. Right. I think there's a whole movie in that now. But thank you very much, Gretchen, because that was super, super interesting.
Awesome. Again, thank you, Melissa. Please send us more suggestions, people. We're going to try to do this a lot more often. And it was cool to have our horizons broadened a little bit. I enjoyed this one.
And especially if we say dumb stuff like, there are no movies about Satan, and you're like, there are plenty of movies about Satan. That's when you need to be sending those suggestions. You know what I mean? To prove us wrong is probably one of the best reasons to suggest a movie.
And it's probably pretty easy to do, I would imagine.
It might be.
Now then, Craig, let's talk about what we're going to watch next, okay? Are you ready?
I am ready.
Craig, have you heard of a movie called Stoker?
Yes, I've heard of it, Sean.
Have you seen it? I just got it. I haven't watched it yet.
I have not seen it.
I can't wait. Have you heard of a movie called Predestination?
I have heard of it.
Oh, man. Yeah, I got to see that one too, right? Ethan Hawke is supposed to be good.
Sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Going down the list. What about The Overnighters?
How new is that?
I'm not going to tell you that. It's not a sitcom from the 1940s, if that's what you think.
I'll go ahead and say I have never heard of it, Sean.
All right, that's fantastic. I believe it is on Netflix.
All right.
I'm excited to see this. I think it's going to be a little different for us, and that's all I'm going to say about it.
Well, Sean, thanks. It's been a terrific show. Mm-hmm. You can check us out on the Twitters. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It's probably like Never Heard Podcast. And you can check us out on our website, which is neverheardofitwebsite.org. And and then you can also check me and Sean out at your local grocery.
I'll be in the hot produce aisle.
Hot produce?
Yeah, it's warm.